Well, any parents will know that it's quite hard sometimes to convey to your children just how urgent some things can be. So you're trying to get out for church or to school, and the time for that comes and goes. And you're trying to get them out the door, aren't you? And you say, we need to go. And say, oh, but I need the loo. Or, we need to go. I haven't brushed my teeth. And you say, oh, dear, what have you been doing? And, why are you just standing there? I can't find my coat. And you think, oh, crumbs, what's wrong with you? Children just don't seem to grasp the urgency sometimes of we need to go. We need to do this now. And Jesus is about to send his disciples out on an urgent mission. Now, he's sent us out on an urgent mission too. Our mission isn't quite the same as theirs. It's a different kind of urgency, but we are on an urgent mission. And yet we can be so easily distracted, can't we? We can forget the urgency. We can forget the mission altogether. So we're going to look at the disciples' mission and see what principles we can learn from that mission. So our first point is that we are sent by Jesus. There's something reassuring when you are in the hands of an expert, isn't there? It's good to know your illness is being treated by a health professional. You think, this is good, I'm in the right place. Good to know your car is being repaired by professionals. We hope, anyway. It's good to know that you hope that the professional decorator you've got in is going to be good. They're going to do a good job. They're going to be efficient. You're going to get a good quality job, not just the bodge that you would have done. But we can bring that mentality of professionalism into the church. Now, sometimes that's helpful. We want to do a good and proper job, don't we? It's not a bad thing in some areas. But yet many of the things that we do in a church are not for the professionals. So the areas of loving one another, that's for everyone. The areas of serving, that is for everyone. And in the area of reaching out to the lost, that's not a job for the professionals. It's the work for all disciples. The context shows that the bits we haven't read, the context shows that the disciples, they were made many mistakes. One of which was they assumed that only people in their tight-knit gang, those in the inner circle, were really the ones that Jesus could use. But actually they had misunderstood. Jesus' mission was not just for them, it was for many people, for all of those who wholeheartedly followed Jesus. And Jesus calls all sorts of different people into his service. So in chapter 10, verse 1, we see Jesus appoints 72 others. 72 others. Can you see that? Just have a look, see if you can find that word. Chapter 10, verse 1. 72 others. Who are these others? They were already disciples. They'd probably been following Jesus for some time, but they're not the 12. They're not the apostles. They're not the professionals, if you like. These are others, other disciples. We don't even know their names. Perhaps they were quite shocked when Jesus appointed them. Perhaps they had assumed that only the 12 would get to do this important stuff, like healing and going out and preaching the good news. And of course, God does specifically gift some people for tasks like apostles, or he did in those days, prophets, evangelists, pastors and teachers. But the job of those people mentioned there in Ephesians 4 is to equip God's people for works of service, not to do everything for themselves. And that's the trouble. We kind of have this mentality that whose job is it to work in the church? Oh, it's the pastor's job, it's the elder's job, it's the deacon's job. No. In so many of these things, it's my job, the elder's job, to equip you for works of service. So I serve in the way I'm equipped, and you serve in the ways that you're equipped to serve. Now, these others here, they weren't particularly outstanding. I get that from verse 21. They were just ordinary disciples. They were the others, the other group. So let's just remember, when we talk of mission, of sharing our faith and of service, we don't have to leave it to the professionals. When we think about the fun day coming up, let's not just assume, well, let's leave it to the proper people, those people that usually do that. Actually, it's for all of us. God uses the weak, the small, the foolish. Think of the shepherd boy, David, before Goliath, or Moses, who couldn't speak properly. God didn't need professionals. He wants people who are willing and who are willing to listen and to trust and to obey. Notice Jesus sent them. Now, it's probably a little while since most of us were at school. But imagine you're at school and you're caught outside of lessons. Now, if you're spotted outside of lessons, your teacher would demand to know, what are you doing? Why aren't you in lessons? But if you have been sent on a mission by the head teacher, you could legitimately say, well, I'm here because, the head teacher said I had to do this thing. And you would have a right to be there, and that would be okay. And Jesus, the King of Kings, is sending out his followers on mission. What confidence that must have instilled in them. And let me just remind you, if you're a believer here, you've been sent out by Jesus too. Sometimes people can get quite angry with us. You do-gooders, Bible bashers, pushing your religion, talking about sin and the need to be saved. But, and as long as we're not being unnecessarily rude or insensitive, actually, we can be encouraged because we have got every right to go into the world and talk about Jesus. That's what we're meant to do. And we've been sent by the King of Kings. He has all authority. So like the school child caught out of lessons, if they have the authority of their head teacher behind them, that's okay. And we have the authority of the King of the universe behind us. So that's a good thing. We've been sent by the King. And Jesus knows it's going to be tough. Oh, we know that, don't we? We appreciate that. That's probably why we're a little bit hesitant to go quite often. It's going to be tough. I think that's one of the reasons he sends them out 2 by 2. Did you notice in verse 3, I'm sending you as lambs out, sending you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. It was going to be tough. It was going to be dangerous. And Christians throughout history have realized this is hard stuff. This isn't easy going to take this message out. It's really hard. It's dangerous. But Jesus talks about the laborers. That word can be translated as workers. So this mission is hard work. It can be dangerous at times. And there's going to be discouragements. And when you're working for the Lord, it's so helpful to have others by your side so that you're not alone. Perhaps at work, it's really helpful to have another Christian there with you who you can meet up with, pray and encourage. It's good to work together, serving the Lord in the ministry. Whatever it is we might be doing to serve the Lord, it's a really healthy thing to have someone else to work to serve with. It keeps us accountable. It enables us to learn, to see how others do it. It spurs us on when we become discouraged. It stops us getting sidetracked. It stops us getting burnt out. So where possible, there's real wisdom in having someone else to work with us in the ministry, in whatever it is we're doing to serve the Lord. So these teams of 2, they're sent out by Jesus and also sent out ahead of Jesus. Verse 1, we see he sent them to where he was about to go. Again, I think that's really encouraging, isn't it? They were sent to prepare the way for Jesus. I wonder if you've ever thought of yourself like that, as one who prepares the way for Jesus. Jesus has sent us into the world to where he might be about to visit in salvation. That's exciting, isn't it? We don't know what God's about to do. We don't know in whose heart is about to work, and yet we've been sent out to prepare the way for him. We might get discouraged sometimes. Nothing ever seems to happen. I never get the chance to speak. No one ever seems to get saved. And yet, we don't know what Jesus is about to do. We're sent out before him. We don't know what he's about to do, what he's already doing in that person's heart. He's put you, me, there, us there for a reason. Wherever it is, your workplace, your home place, your group, your family, your friends, you are there and you can speak about Jesus to prepare the way for Jesus in those people. So don't give up. Be patient. Be faithful. Because look at verse 2. Look at verse 2. The harvest is plentiful. I don't know if picking blackberries is your thing or not. I find it a bit tedious myself, but my wife loves it, and it gives you free fruit, and I'm all up for free things, so I endure picking blackberries. In fact, only this morning I had some free blackberries on my breakfast. I did notice there was a little creature scurrying out of one as I was about to put it there, so I put that aside. But free fruit, that's great, isn't it? And when you're picking the blackberries, you can be looking at the hedgerow, loads of blackberries there. The harvest is plentiful, but when you get up close, you realize actually it's not always that easy to pick the blackberries. There's thorns in there, there's spiky things, they're just a bit out of reach, there's spiders, and you go, there's cobwebs and things. And you think, I don't really want to put my hand there. And you can think, I can't get them. But just because harvesting might be hard and painful at times and even a bit scary, it doesn't mean there isn't a harvest. Jesus says the harvest is plentiful. He doesn't say it's easy. He says it's plentiful. In fact, the problem isn't so much the harvest. The problem's more to do with the workers. See, there's not enough of them. This is often the issue in many churches. Really, it's the issue in this church as well. There's just not enough people to do what needs to be done. So let's not miss this. There are people out there who God is going to save. They might be behind a bramble right now. There might be a bit of a spider's web in the way, and it's making you think twice about going in there and speaking to that person. But if we go out there in obedience to Jesus and speak of him, sooner or later, we will find there is a harvest. So I'm just trying to encourage you, don't give up. Don't be deterred. There is a harvest to be had. So if the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, what can be done? Well, Jesus tells us what can be done, and we'll look at that in our second point, pray and go, which kind of gives it away a bit. Pray and go. So the first thing Jesus says is pray earnestly to the Lord. It seems so obvious, really, when we think about it, doesn't it? Pray earnestly to the Lord. So are you longing for another Christian to be in your workplace? You think, if only there'd be another. Well, pray about that. Lord, would you please bring someone in who I can work with to reach my workplace for you? Do we need more? We do need more youth workers to work with the youngsters. Do we need more musicians and cleaners or whatever it is, or people to work in the ministries, people to be on the AV and the music and or the technology stuff? Yeah, we do. So actually we need to be praying that the Lord would raise up these workers. If we're not seeing people saved, then we need to be praying about that, don't we? The problem is not the harvest fields. There is fruit out there. The problem is the lack of workers. So let's be asking the Lord to raise up workers. I wonder, will you put that on your prayer list if you have a prayer list? Is there some area in the church, they need help in there? Let's pray about that. Let's come to the Lord about that. Lord, would you raise up workers for that? And the encouragement is that we're not coming in prayer to someone that knows nothing about this, is completely detached and remote and has no idea about the field that we're in. Actually, who do we come to? It is the Lord of the harvest. It's his harvest field. It belongs to him. So let's ask the Lord to send workers out into his harvest fields. But then notice the next thing Jesus says in verse 3. Go. Here's the thing. If we're asking the Lord to provide workers to send, we have to be aware that we might be the answer to our own prayer, and we might be the one God sends. You see, the problem might not be so much that there's not enough workers, but actually that there's not enough willing workers. Remember, these weren't the professionals. These weren't the apostles Jesus is sending out. They're just plain, everyday disciples, just like you and me. We're not just to pray, but we're also to go, to get involved in some way. And what that looks like will be different for each one of us. You know, we're not to just transport every single detail from this mission onto us and our lives. We're just taking some of the principles here. But of course, as we start to think about us going or serving in some way, there's all sorts of doubts and worries and things that come into our minds. I can't go. I wouldn't know what to say. I'm not brave enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not knowledgeable enough. But look at Jesus' rallying cry here. Verse 3. I am sending you out like lambs among wolves. It's not much of a rallying cry, is it, really? You can hardly imagine a football coach sending out his team for an important match and saying, right, come on, lads, I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves, so go and get them. It's like, what? What is that? What's that meant to do? Well, apart from warn them that actually it's going to be tough out there, it's dangerous out there, so be careful, what it does is it makes us look to God. He's not sending us out because we are tough and we are strong or we are brave and we have all the answers to everything. That's not why he sends us. He uses the weak and the foolish. He used fishermen and uneducated men to found his church. And yes, they made mistakes. Yes, they got stuff wrong just like us. But the call is not that we go out into the world and go, yeah, we can take them, we've got this. No, the call is that we look into the world, we see their need, we see the danger, but we go in the Lord's strength, calling on him, Lord, help us. We can't do this on our own. So knowing that it's Jesus who sends us, it's Jesus who's going to be with us, we can go in obedience and in trust and dependence upon him. That's the rallying call. It's dangerous out there. So we are to rely on the Lord. And we see this trust, this reliance on the Lord. We see this coming out in the next statement. So verse 4. Do not take a purse or a bag or sandals, and do not greet anyone on the road. Now we just have to note that this isn't a universal command that justifies being ill-prepared. This isn't a universal missional sort of principle to be applied to mission work. Later, Jesus reminds them of this very command, later on in chapter 22, verse 36. But he goes on then later, he says, now, I remind you that time you didn't take anything, but now he says, take a purse, take a bag, and also a sword. But this was for them at that point there. There was a lesson they needed to learn, and that lesson was they need to learn what it means to trust on the Lord, to depend on the Lord. He's sending them, and he will provide for them. So don't take any money. Don't take the spare clothes. Don't take the sandals. That might mean go barefoot, but probably not. It probably means don't take any spare shoes. Just go as you are. That's the idea. Just go as you are, and the Lord will provide what you need. But what about Jesus' command not to greet anyone? That sounds a bit rude, doesn't it? You know, you're sort of out and about and someone says hello and says, oh, can't talk to you. Well, Eastern salutations were often quite lengthy and complicated. And here Jesus is bringing out the urgency. Don't stop and pack. Don't get weighed down with extra baggage. Don't get sidetracked with all the unnecessary interactions. You've got a mission and it's urgent. Just go. I think that's a pertinent lesson for us, isn't it, really? How quickly we forget. You know, we wake up tomorrow morning and our mind is filled with 101 other things, all the responsibilities, all the things we have to do, all the things we squeeze into our waking hours so that our mission of going and helping others come to know Jesus it's just forgotten, isn't it, really? And then perhaps a whole week can go by and we've barely given Jesus a thought. I'm not saying that to make you feel guilty. This is just life, isn't it? So this is a reminder. Life is tough. There's all sorts of legitimate responsibilities and they do have to be dealt with. But it is a reminder that we are on an urgent mission. Let's not forget the mission of Mercy to share the good news of Jesus. It is urgent because it's a matter of life and death. People need to hear the gospel. There's many distractions, but Jesus calls his disciples to pray, to go, to trust, to stay focused on the mission, the task that we've been called to. So I just wonder, how focused are we? I'm talking about as individuals, and then it's easy to say the church, but let's just think about ourselves. How focused are you on your mission of sharing Jesus? How much does that come into your sort of daily life, your daily prayer life? Lord, help me to share you today. The church is not a club to entertain Christians until we get to heaven. It's not what we're about. It's not a waiting room for heaven. We are on a mission to see souls saved. We're on a mission to see people know Jesus more and come to delight in him more. That's what we're about. Seeing people come to know and love the Lord Jesus. So let's not be distracted by all these other things. As good as they are, as necessary as they are, all these other things, they have to be done. Yet let's stay focused. We need to make Jesus known. But Jesus hasn't finished yet. He's told them to go. He's told them what to pack. He's told them about the journey. He also wants to tell them what to do when they get there. We're going to look at that in our final point, upon arrival. Upon arrival. Your summer holidays might seem like a long time ago now. I know some people are only off on their summer holidays now. Some people are yet to go on their summer holidays. Lovely to have those holidays. But when you're going on a summer holiday, you think, right, okay, what we need to do is we need to find our accommodation. Sat-nav usually helps with that, doesn't it? So you find your accommodation. And when you've got there, you think, right, where's the nearest shop? You need to go and get some food. So you have to make sure you've got food and drink to sustain you. And when all the practical things are sorted, now you can think, okay, what are we going to do then? Where are we going to go down the beach or go for a walk or something? So you need to sort these things out. And Jesus gives instructions to cover all these things. Where they're going to stay, what they're going to eat, and what they're going to do whilst they're out on mission. So firstly, where do they stay? Verse 5 and 6. Whatever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. And if a son of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him. But if not, it will return to you. It's not really obvious what that peace is. Was it simply a customary greeting of shalom? Well, it could be, but it seems like a bit more than that, doesn't it? It's likely to mean, do they welcome us? Are they open and sympathetic to the message, the gospel message that we're bringing? Have they got an open heart to this message? So they are to go where they are welcomed, where they get a hearing. And it makes sense, doesn't it, when you think about it? If the harvest field, especially back then, was really bountiful and full, then you go to the people that are going to listen. Don't waste the time on those who just refuse to listen, who reject you. You're just talking to a thin air then, and it's also a waste of time. So if we're to apply that today, if you find in your office or school there are a few people who are interested in thinking about Jesus, who want to talk, and there's also some people who just aren't interested at all, then we start with the ones who want to engage, don't we? We say if they're interested, then we speak to them. There might come a time when the others will too, but we look for the opportunity, we look for the welcome, we look for the open door. That's what we do. Secondly, what do they do about the provisions? Well, remember, they'd taken nothing, so they needed to be provided for. And Jesus assures them, don't feel bad, you do deserve to be looked after on that mission. You deserve to have food. Don't feel guilty about eating the food, and you deserve your wages. Those who work full-time for the gospel can expect to be supported from that work. But Jesus does give them a note of caution. Verse 7, it's repeated in verse 8, eat and drink whatever they give you. Well, as Jews in unfamiliar towns, they might have been concerned whatever food that's being served up, it might not be kosher. I mean, it probably would have been, but there's no guarantee. But Jesus says, just don't worry, just eat what is given you. It also warns them from being too picky, too fussy. They could have gone in there and said, don't you know who we are? we are the disciples of Jesus. We are the King's messengers. Bring us the best wine. Slaughter your fattened calf. Only the best will do. Nothing less will do for us. That wasn't to be them. In fact, Jesus says, don't move from house to house looking for the people that shop at M&S instead of Lidl. You're not looking for the best deal, the best thing. If you get a good deal, great, just eat it. If you get a bit of a raw, well, maybe not raw food, but, a raw deal, then just eat it. Just get what you're given. Don't be picky. Don't be fussy. They deserve to be provided for, but they're not to be demanding and fussy. Just be content with what you're given. Sometimes believers can be unnecessarily difficult about our things, our rights, our privileges, our status. Recognize me, love me, give me this. We sort of go in there with this slightly entitled sort of view of ourselves. Don't you know who I am? I'm really important. Actually, we're just servants. We're servants of the King, but we're just servants. And a self-centered, awkward attitude that's always demanding and difficult, that is unbecoming of those who are about the gospel of grace. So I do hope that we're not an awkward people as we live our lives in the world, sort of demanding and just making a fuss all the time. So Jesus speaks about a place to stay. He speaks about the provisions, and it was only right that they had proper provisions. And he tells them about the work they are to pursue. And the work that they pursue, it falls into two categories here. So their deeds and their speech. So verse 9, they are to heal the sick. As they were coming completely fresh into these unknown towns, unannounced, they needed something to validate their ministry and what they were saying. And I don't want to get sidetracked on healing today, only to point out that as the New Testament progresses, the emphasis on miraculous healing and signs, that seems to lessen as we go on. And not that God doesn't heal today, he does. But whatever your views on this, it's clear that not many, if any, have been given the same kind of healing power that the disciples had back then. I don't think anyone really can walk into a town and just heal everyone, can they? So clearly something is different. But back then, the disciples, these others, these ordinary disciples, they had been given the power to heal. And that would mean people would listen. It validated their ministry. They had deeds to do. They could heal whole towns. But the principle remains for us. We might not be able to do that, but we're not just to speak the message of the gospel. We are to act it out, to do things too. Matthew 5:16, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. This is part of how we make disciples, by showing real practical help and love and concern to others, so that they don't just hear the words we're saying, they don't just hear about a loving God, but actually they see the loving God in action through his people. It's often through these loving deeds, as we reach out to help people, to love people, that they are able to become aware and understand something of the message of the loving God. And that's the second part of their work. They are to do these deeds that show love and help people. They are also to speak. It's no good just doing good things and hoping they'll kind of sort of read your mind about why you're doing it. We are to speak the message too. They were to announce that the kingdom had come near. There is a new time upon them. There is a new people being built. There is a new king in town. This is what they were to announce. So their job was to announce Jesus, to introduce the people to Jesus. And that's what we're called to do too. We can talk about all sorts of things, can't we? We might like talking about creation, or environmental issues, or politics, or ethics, or abuse, and that's good and right that we talk about that. We're thinking about that tonight, and those things need to be addressed. But fundamentally, the heart of our message, the thing we cannot leave out, the priority in our message is Jesus. It's always got to be Jesus. The trouble is we can get so busy talking about these other things that we forget to mention Jesus. He comes first. It's always leading people to Jesus. And then we explain all that entails as part of discipleship. So that's Jesus' instructions on what to do when they arrive and they are welcomed. But he also mentions what to do if they're not welcomed, because, like us, they don't always get a warm welcome. And we know that people don't want to hear. And so he tells them what they're to do. If there's no house of peace or of welcome to the gospel, they're to go into the streets. The Greek word there means the main street, the high street, the one that everything came off. And they are to still declare the kingdom of God has come near. But this time they are to deliver a warning. They're to wipe the dust from their feet as a warning. That seems strange to us, but it's full of cultural significance to them. And they would have clearly understood what was going on. These people that watched these men sort of wiping their sandals. It's what the Jews did when they left Gentile territory. It showed that these people are not part of God's people. We're not going to take contamination from them into our Jewish towns and villages. They are excluded. They are on the outside. And this was a serious warning, that those who rejected Jesus will themselves be rejected. And then Jesus goes on in verses 12 to 15 to show how serious it is to reject Jesus. These towns like Chorazin and Bethsaida and Capernaum, all towns that Jesus performed great miracles in. They saw some wonderful things. Jesus spent time there. He taught there. They were towns where the kingdom of God in Jesus had drawn near. They had great opportunity with Jesus, but Jesus says it would be more bearable for places like Sodom and Tyre and Sidon at the judgment than for them. Sodom was infamous for its outrageous and depraved sin. But Jesus says it's going to be more bearable for them, or for that outrageous town there on Judgment Day, than for these places that have seen Jesus and chosen to reject him. And these towns, they were full of religious people. People who counted themselves as good people. They thought they knew God, but Jesus doesn't pull his punches. He says, those who reject Jesus, the Saviour, they will go to hell. Those who've been given chance after chance and they have rejected those opportunities, they will suffer more. That's a serious warning for some of us, isn't it? A serious warning. We might come to church week in, week out, and we might not take all this stuff too seriously, but Jesus returns to this theme in Luke 12:48. For everyone who's been given much, much will be demanded. If you've been given many opportunities to hear the gospel and to respond, and you know the truth, but you just refuse to accept it, this is the warning. It will be worse for you on Judgment Day than it will be for the city God literally blew to pieces. So we need to think carefully about what we are doing with Jesus. Are you welcoming him? Are you listening to him? Have you accepted him? Or are you closing the door to him and saying, no, thank you? So this mission is urgent. It's life and death. And our concern is not so much how plentiful the harvest fields still are. Our concern here for us are, how faithful are we as workers? Jesus calls ordinary people like you and me, he calls us to pray and to go. What going looks like for each one of us is going to be different. We've got different gifts. We're not all called to preach, but we're called to get involved in this great mission in one way or another. So I wonder, as we close, let me ask you, will you do that? Will you do that? Will you pray? Lord, help me, use me, raise up workers, send me. We're not all called to preach, but we are all called on a mission, and there's nothing more urgent than this. So we need to listen, we need to trust, and we need to obey. Well, just be quiet before the Lord as you consider whether you are willing to pray and to go.